The Report Template Builder in LoadCall is an insanely powerful design engine where you can create custom Excel or PDF files that match whatever demands your customers may have in terms of files that they want downloaded for you. So in this video, we're going to cover Excel files. We'll do PDFs in a separate video. But one thing to note, this is kind of a bit of a high learning curve. This is a quite complicated part of the LoadCall software because it does have a lot of flexibility. So this video might end up being a little bit long and you may need help from support to use this page initially, but it is very convenient once you're familiar with it to be able to go in and change or create new reports without needing anyone's assistance or having to pay a fee to your software company in order to do it for you. So pretty useful feature to have, even if it is a little bit difficult to use. So we're going to go ahead and create a new template. And we could start completely with a blank template, but instead I think I'm going to start with, we'll start with a blank template, I guess. You can also start from a different template if you wanted to. So you could load in an existing report and use that as your basis for what you're building. But we're going to go ahead and create a blank template and kind of run through it really quick. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Give our report a name. We're just going to call it test reports. I'm going to click create new report. And in the next segment, we'll start going through this. All right, so now that we've made a new template, you can notice up at the top, there's this big red banner that says changes not saved. And this will show up whenever we make a change to the file. So if I go ahead and click save, it'll go away. We'll see the notification here that says it was saved. But if I go ahead and change anything in here, like even just put in, another number right there, test report 1, even if I undo it, it's going to prompt us to save it. So this just reminds you that your changes have not been saved, so you can kind of periodically go through and save as you make those changes. So across the top right here, the back button goes back out to the main reports, new template, and load template we can't do until we save this, which is convenient. Then we could load in a new template or an existing template. The download test report button lets you download the a copy of the report. It'll pull some recent tickets from the last couple of days so you can see what it looks like. And the copy to client button probably won't show up based on your organization settings, so don't worry about it. But as we go down here, you can see that the test report is the name of our report right here. If we change this, then it changes the top right here, and we have the ability to save or delete this report. And underneath the report configuration, you can see that we have the report name, which is client-facing. However, there is also the ability to have a report client name, which will override the name of the report when any of your clients have it in their portal. So you may call this like the Bravo Energy Core report template, but they may want to call it the standard run tickets or something like that. So you can put a name here that will override whatever they are when they're downloading. The description, you can put notes in here as you're building it. If there's multiple people working on it, then, or if you want to put a descriptor on here, you could do that. And the last couple options down here, we're running Excel instead of PDF in this example. We want our ticket to be, or our report to be available in the tickets download section. So we're going to go ahead and choose that. We could choose invoices if we wanted to show up inside of an invoice. And then we could check this box if we want our report to be downloaded as a CSV, comma separated value format. If we don't check it, then it's just going to be a normal Excel, like an XLSX or something like that file, just a normal Excel file that has access to all that. And then the last thing down here is available for use. So once our report template is done, we can check this box, which will make it show up in the rest of the reports. But we are not done with it, so we don't want to check it yet so people don't accidentally use it. But yeah, so we're going to go in the next section, add a sheet to it and kind of get started there. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is add a sheet to our Excel file. So Excel files do support the ability to have quite a few different number of sheets in here if you need to have multiple different tabs or pages for them. One thing to note, though, is if you choose the CSV file format right here, if you check this box, then it will only pull the first sheet since it does not support having multiple different tabs with that file format. So something to be aware of there. But we can add a new sheet by clicking this button right here, and we can give the sheet a name. So I'm just going to call this tickets, but you can name this whatever you want. You can name it sheet 1 or loads or whatever you want. And after you create it, you could go ahead and change the name as well. And down here, we're in the sheet configuration section now. If we wanted to rename it, we could change the name right here. If we want to delete this tab, we can delete it up here, which will wipe everything. And then we've got some other configurations down here. So right now, this sheet is not having any data pulled into it. So it's a no data, i.e. kind of a cover page. So if you need to have like a front page where it has information on it or something, or a back page, you could do that. But we want to just have this be a single tabbed spreadsheet with all of our load information on the first page. So we're going to change no data to pull ticket data. And there are a few other options in here if you want to just pull reject loads or tickets with wait times. Those are some of the options that have been set up for this company. But normally you just want to pull everything. So let's go ahead and choose tickets. And then the next thing down here is we have our sheet content, which has the ability to put in extra headers, a repeated data section, and then a footer. And then further down, we have some of these custom settings that we'll cover later, the ability to do frozen cells, merge cells, things like that. But we're going to go ahead and in the next section, start creating some of the repeated data right here and work through that process. Okay, so in order to add columns with data for every single row on it, we're going to go ahead and check the box right here called repeated data. And what this does is it opens a new section right here where you have the header, the content, the format, and the decimal places, and some other options down here. But the first thing we're going to do is add a column. So right here, we've just created column A of our spreadsheet, and we're going to go ahead and call this color, we'll call it ticket number. And in order to map this to the proper field, there is an option here called content. So content has a bunch of different properties that are saved on the tickets. Like there's a ton of stuff in here: driver measurements, timestamps, accounting information, etc. So typically what we want to do is search the top right here. So I know that my ticket number is probably an ID number. Maybe it's actually just called ticket number. Yep, identification ticket number. So we can go ahead and select that. And now this column, column A, will have our ticket number. And if we wanted to go ahead and add another column, we can click on the add column right here. Or up here at the top, there's always a little plus right here. So if we wanted to go ahead and create a new column right here in the middle or at the end, we can click on those. So for example, if I make a pickup location, and we'll do drop-off location, and we're going to do purchaser. So if we wanted to rearrange these, which let's map these really quick. So purchaser, we want the purchaser's name, the drop-off location. Let's start searching drop-off. Drop-off city, state, the drop-off actual name, the pickup location. So it looks like a pickup name. So we've kind of got some of this in here. Now, if we wanted to move these around, there's a little trade column option right here. So let's say I want to move my purchaser over into the column B right there. I can go ahead and click the trade column and then do it again. And instead of, copying and pasting, moving things around, you can move it around that way. So now so far, and I'm going to go ahead and click save as we made some changes, we have a ticket number, a purchaser, a pickup location, and a drop-off location columns. And they're all mapped properly. So if I wanted to, if I had a column in here that I didn't want anymore, I could go ahead and click on the delete column right here. It'll make me confirm that I actually want to delete it. And I can go ahead and do that. So with that, let's move on to the next section where we'll talk about some of the options you have for these columns. All right, so now we're going to click on these three-dot menus next to the columns and see some of the options in there. So by default, the main one is custom cell styles. However, for the content ones, there are a couple other options in here that we'll go over. So the cell styles lets you go in and kind of change the look and feel of the column or row or cell that you're working on. So we could add in a solid fill color, for example. If we do that, then we want to choose a color. Maybe we want this one to be, a red cell right there. And if we wanted to increase the font size, we could go ahead and do that. So maybe we want to make this 28 to make it larger. And then we have the ability to also change the font color if we wanted to go ahead and do that. So we're kind of just throwing in some ugly looking changes here, but showing some of the options in here. We can make it bold, we can underline the text, we can italicize the text, and do some of the alignment. So if we want it to be center aligned horizontally, you can scroll up and see the preview. It'll look like that. Vertical align center as well, or top, bottom, it doesn't really matter. And then we have the ability to change the borders too. So if we wanted to make there be a thick top border, let's do a bottom border. We can do that. We can also change the color of it. So let's make it blue in this case. So you can see here on this example. And it looks like I made it white. We want to make it blue. So we got to drag this over here. So yeah, it's blue now instead of white. So we got a thick blue border right there. And we have the ability to wrap text. And then this next part right here is kind of important. This is how you want to apply these styles. So we may want to apply it to just a cell, to a column, to a row, or to an entire section. So if I apply it to a cell, let's go ahead and do that, then it only applies to this cell right here. If I wanted instead to apply it to an entire row, I could go ahead and do it like that. And some of the stuff, in order to be easier to type and use, like the yellow text isn't showing up and it has white behind it. When you download it, it actually have the yellow text and everything. This preview just shows some of the changes, but kind of keeps it so that it's still kind of manageable to work with. But so that's an entire row. If I wanted to do a column, I could apply it to a column. And in this case, it looks like it actually did put the yellow in there, since that's instead of a type, that's a drop down. So that's fine. And then if we wanted to apply it to an entire section, we could do that. I'm going to do that with a one of these over here, customize the cell styles, and I'm going to apply it to the entire section to kind of wipe that ugly style that we put in there off. So probably don't want to do that, but you can apply columns, rows, an individual cell, or the entire thing. So more likely than not, you'd probably just, do a bold and then maybe do like a border bottom, probably something like that. So let's go ahead and give it a black bottom, and we'll just apply that to the entire row. So you can see that right there. The one thing to note, though, with changing these styles is that if I insert a new column, the style is not going to be applied across into new territory here. So I'd have to come in here into my custom cell styles and click, and I'm going to change the border to be thin instead of thick, but I would apply it just to have to reapply it to the row. And then you can see right here that it's applied right here as well. So one thing to note with that. But yeah, that's the cell custom styles for the report template builder. So after that, we're going to walk through some of the other stuff in here. So besides the cell styles option, the two other options that show up for the content section are the custom cell content and the remove mapping. All that the remove mapping does is it takes and it gets rid of what's currently in this box right here. So if I wanted to get rid of ticket number, I could click remove mapping and it'll kind of blank it out right there. So I'd have to come in and choose a new one. So that's useful if you don't want to delete a cell that has styles or things like that, but you want it to be blank now. So we're going to go ahead and put ticket number back in there. The more intense one is the custom cell content though. By default, we have it set up so that you can just pull a property off of a ticket in here, any of the different properties in there. And sometimes you just need other content in there, and that's where the custom cell content is. So if we click on that, it opens up a window in here where we can choose the custom cell content. So by default, this box is not checked. We are not using custom content. We're just pulling in the ticket property that we have in there. But we could go ahead and click on custom content and do some other stuff in here. So I'm going to create a new cell right here, and we are going to, what we'll probably do, let's bring in, this is an example with, let's do barrels. So we're going to bring in the loaded barrels. And what we want to do also, let's bring in the miles. So we're going to bring in a distance, and then we're going to use that as an example to come up with the number of barrels per mile or something like that. So let's do miles right here. So let's do loaded miles. And with other different fields, and if we want to reapply that style, you usually want to probably do style last just because you don't have to do this multiple times. But if I wanted to reapply it, I could do that. But with different types of properties over here at the bottom, there sometimes is the ability to do a format or a decimal option. So in this case, these are both numbers. So I'm going to just do my barrels rounded to 2 decimals, and I'm going to do 0 decimals for my miles, so it's like a whole number. Some of the other stuff in here, if I pull in like, let's do arrive time. So timestamp driver arrived at, we'll do a pickup. So if I do that, then you gain access to this format column. So you could go ahead and choose, your date, time format, or whatever in here, which sometimes gives you custom ones where you could type in a custom format where, the capital M's are months, lowercase d's are days, etc. But I'm just going to choose one of the default ones right there. So now that we kind of have some of the stuff in here, I'm going to add a new column, and we want to use custom content to take barrels and divide them by miles, which isn't necessarily a useful figure to have, but it is useful to be able to have this kind of tool set if there are cases where you need to do averages or things like that. So I'm going to come into here and choose custom content. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to save because we made some changes. I'm going to go into here, choose custom content, and I'm going to click use custom content in cell. And I'm going to give this a name. So it's usually a good idea to give this a pretty descriptive name to say what it is exactly that you're doing. So I'm going to call this barrels divided by miles. And I'm going to go ahead and apply, even though I haven't done this yet. We'll go ahead and apply it. And you can see right here, if it's custom content, it's going to be italicized. There's not like a white drop down anymore. And there's a little blue flask right here to show that it's kind of like some custom stuff going on. So we've named this barrels divided by miles. We haven't actually done anything with it though. So we're going to go back into custom cell content, and we can choose a few different options in here. So we'll go through these in different sections, but what we want to do right now is just do an Excel function. We'll cover the other ones in different sections right here. But Excel function is one of the options, and we can do a couple different things here. If we choose Excel function, we can have it be a repeated data column sum, so we could sum up an entire column, which we're not going to do in this case. Instead, we're going to do a custom Excel function. So in here, we have to type in the custom Excel formula that we need. And one thing to note is $R is a placeholder for the row number that the function occurs on. So this does require you to have a little familiarity with Excel, how the different Excel functions work. But in theory, you could come in here and you could write index match functions. You could do VLOOKUPs. You could do whatever the heck you wanted to do in here with this little bit in here. But I'm going to go back out really fast. And we are doing column E divided by column F and whatever this row number is. So in order to do that, let's go back into custom cell content. And I'm going to choose Excel. I didn't save that. So Excel function again, custom Excel function. So we're doing E, and we don't know what the row number is. There's going to be a lot of different rows. So we're going to do #R, and then we're going to do divided by F #R. So what this will do is this is going to take, in this example, row 1 is kind of the headers. But in the second row, this would be cell E2 divided by cell F2, and then the next row would be E3 divided by F3. So we kind of have that function in there as we want to. And then the last thing in here is the ability to override the data type. I'm just going to set this to be a number, but you could set it to be none, a Boolean, which is a true or false. If it needed to be a currency, we could do that, percent, strings, numbers, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that and save, and later we'll go ahead and see an example here, and I can say, we're not going to round this. We're just going to do, well, maybe we'll round it to 2 decimals just so it doesn't give like 30 decimals when there's like an irrational number. But yeah, that's the custom content. The first part, we're going to go over the other options in there in the next section. So now that we've covered how to do an Excel function that automatically will pull in the row numbers so that you can kind of do math equations on individual lines of tickets, which can be useful for calculating out, dollars per mile, barrels per mile, dollars per barrel, things like that. A bunch of those, multiplication, division, or you could do a sum of different properties in there. We're going to cover some of the other custom cell content that you may have in there. So I'm going to go ahead and click plus, create a new column in here. We'll go over here. And we are going to go in and create some more custom cell content. So in this case, let's run through some of the other ones here. So the simplest one is definitely hard code. So we're going to just call this hard code number. So a hard code is just the ability to put in just some content in there. So sometimes your customers may want you to include a column where it just gives you like a transporter ID number or some other facility ID number that you're always dropping off at or something. If it's something that never, ever, 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 ever changes, then you could go ahead and put that in here. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call this test hard code. And I'm going to, it's a string, so I'm going to put it that. String is just like, letters. So let's go ahead and put that in there. So that's pretty straightforward. We'll call this transporter ID number. So let's go ahead and create a new column right here. I'm going to go ahead and save some of these changes, and we're going to do some more custom cell content. So the next one we can talk about, let's do mapped fields, because custom logic is probably the most complicated. But a mapped field lets you pull in information that is not necessarily tied to a specific individual ticket. Usually this is useful for invoicing. As you can see in here, this organization that I've set up has a bunch of invoice settings in here, some settlement ones, but we don't have those set up properly in the system. But if you wanted to include the invoice name or the invoice month or something like that, or any of this purchaser information that's not necessarily tied to a ticket, but is information that you may want to pull on here, you could go ahead and do that. Typically, that's something you might not have in this repeated data section. Instead, what you may do is have it up here in an extra header or down in a footer section. So we'll cover that really quick. If I wanted to create extra content above my repeated kind of looped tickets right here, I can go ahead and click on that and add new rows, new columns. So if I wanted to say, this is invoice, and I wanted to say, let's invoice name and invoice date. Even though I know we're not making an invoice, we can go ahead and include this. We could do invoice name, and then we'll custom content here. We're going to, not hard code, we're going to map the invoice name and put it there. And you'll notice I didn't give it a name, so it's just called generic custom content. I could go ahead and say this is, invoice name, so that somebody doesn't have to open this up to kind of search what's going on. And then if I wanted to put in the mapped field of invoice date, I could go ahead and do that as well. So we'll just do invoice created date and apply that. Also didn't name it there. But yeah, so those mapped fields are usually invoice specific information or information about your customer that you may need to have at the top of your report before you even get into your data set here. And that's what's good about the extra header up here. You can do that. And you can see that we have the ability to add columns, just like we do down there. Delete that. But it also has, because this is kind of just each column is, an item, and then each row is one of your tickets. You just kind of don't have a lot of rows in here. But if you wanted to create rows in the middle right here, or move rows up and down, you could go ahead and do that. Delete them as well. So you've got those similar movement abilities up here. And then you also have, in addition to custom cell content, you also can customize the styles up here using the exact same style editor. And the same thing goes for the bottom. So sometimes you want to have a footer. Maybe you want to have sums down here at the bottom. You could go ahead and do that as well. So you could add a bunch of columns, put a sum down here. But yeah, so that's the mapping and the hard coding. In the next section, we'll cover the last bit of custom content, which is the custom logic editor. All right, so we've saved the most complicated bit of custom content editor for last. I'm going to go ahead and save quick really here. And over here, we're going to open up the custom cell content editor again. Click use custom cell content. And in this case, we're going to do custom logic. So these other ones, the Excel function lets you use native Excel functions, sums, VLOOKUPs, index match, things like that. Hardcode lets you just type in whatever you want, and then mapped field lets you pull in additional information that's not tied to a specific ticket, usually invoice information or a settlement information. But the one that probably gives you the most flexibility, but is also the most complicated, is going to be this custom logic editor. So if I click on this, it's going to open up a custom logic settings section that is very similar to the rate sheet logic editor. It's actually using kind of the same components here. So if you're familiar with that, you'll be right at home here. If not, we'll kind of try and explain it a bit. But basically, your custom logics let you pull information from the tickets and make decisions about what content to show based on what ticket information is there. So this is made up of conditions and formulas. So a condition, if we click on add condition, we are going to have kind of an if or else statement. So if this condition is met, we're going to go here. Otherwise, we're going to go down here. So we're going to go ahead and put in if, and then in here we can choose all of the same things that you can map to. But we're going to say if we'll do something based off of mileage. So I'm going to scroll down here. I believe mileage is underneath the measurements section. We could also just use the search at the top. But we're going to say if the rerouted miles are greater than 0, so we're going to choose a hard-coded number and put in 0. So basically, if there was rerouted miles specified on this ticket, since it's greater than 0, then we can add in a formula. And in here, we're going to, well, actually, let's put a formula down here. I'm going to go in, and we could remove a formula here if we wanted to. But I'm going to say we're going to put in a hard-coded string, and we're going to say this is not rerouted. And my operator for hard-coded strings is going to be nothing. So basically, this is a non-reroute. Up here, though, I'm going to put in one more condition in here, and we're going to pull up that same one. So mileage, we'll type it in, get rerouted miles, and we're going to say if it's greater than or equal to, and we'll put in a hard-coded number. Again, we're going to say if it's greater than or equal to 25 miles, then we're going to add a formula. We're just going to put in the hard-coded string. Usually on these, you do a lot of hard-coded strings and hard-coded numbers for whatever conditions you need here. But I'm going to put in a hard-coded string right here. So if it's greater than or equal to 25, then I want to say that this is a long-distance reroute. Otherwise, I'm going to change and put a formula down here. So if we kind of work through this again, you can see if it's greater than 0, and then it's not greater than 25, so it's between 0 and 25, we can go ahead and put in a hard-coded string that says, we'll call it short distance reroute. So, and then up here, I probably want to name this. We're going to call this coded distance reroutes or something. So this could be as complicated or simple as you need it to be. You could put in a bunch of conditions. You could go 10 conditions deep and have all sorts of different parts of a ticket getting used in here. Barrels, mileages, reroutes, wait times, whatever like this needs to be. Usually it's not that complicated, but it is as complicated as it needs to be. But basically all this custom logic, what it lets you do is it will kind of let you go in and pretty much under any circumstance, you can take information in there. Like hard code lets you just put in a number. This one lets you put in whatever you need, but also based off of some other criteria that needs to be met. So it's pretty useful once in a while. Most reports do not use this. Most reports don't even use the custom content. Usually you're able to get away with just showing ticket information. But these ones right here, they do let you, of varying degrees of difficulty. That one's obviously probably the most difficult, but it gives you the absolute most flexibility to go in and do a bunch of other stuff in there. In fact, it even lets you do kind of a little bit of math in there too. So if we wanted to go back into the custom cell content, what we could do, let's just remove this not rerouted. I'll copy that so I can re-add it back in. But if instead we wanted to have like the sum of like mileages, we could add in a formula and we could do mileage standard plus mileage reroute. So we could do that. And in fact, if we wanted to subtract that from the other one, we could do the step 1 result. So we could do standard plus reroute, and then we can do that minus, let's say, the loaded, for example. So this could be a way to find the discrepancy. You take the standard distance plus the reroute and make sure that it matches up with their loaded. So you could make sure that this kind of zeroes out. So some cool stuff you can do in there if you wanted to. I'm going to remove I'll just remove that step and redo this first one right here. So we're going to do up here at the top, hard-coded string again, and change back to nothing. So we could go ahead and save that. But yeah, so you may never need to use that. If you do, you're more than welcome to reach out to support. They can walk you through it. But if any of your customers ever throw a curveball at you in terms of what they want in their report, there is no way that LoadCall can get stumped with it. This can handle any sort of weird situation that they've got coming for you. So pretty useful. But in the next section, we're going to talk about a little bit more and kind of start wrapping this up. All right, so now we've kind of gone through how to add a bunch of rows and columns, change the styles on them, change the content in there, change the formatting. So you can see it might be a little bit time consuming to go through and do this, but it does let you pretty much get it to look exactly the way that you want it to, as well as have the exact content that you want to have it in the exact locations that you want it. So pretty powerful there. But what other options we have in here, we'll run through those really quick. So we do have the ability to have these tickets sorted. It will suggest that you use drop-off name right here, but you could sort by any sort of property that makes sense in here. So we'll go ahead and sort by drop-off name. It should be somewhere around here, association, drop-off name. And then it also has a secondary sort, so it can sort by one property, and then within that property, it'll sort by a second property. So this is useful if you want to have all of your tickets sorted by where they got delivered, but then by the timestamp within that. So you can choose a secondary property in there. So we'll go ahead and also do the timestamp, driver departed. We'll do departed drop-off, which is the recommended ones just because it kind of keeps everything pretty clean. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the footer. I don't really want it. One thing to note, though, if you do want to turn these off and later come back in and you may want to bring it back in, it does save your extra header information and extra footer information, so you don't lose them if you do change that. But kind of going down now, we're down to this last section where we have the ability to add a few more Excel-specific things. A lot of these don't necessarily work if you've used the CSV file format, like frozen cells and merged cells and things like that don't work. But in here, we do have the ability to, well, let's go ahead and put an extra header back in there, and I'm going to add a cell right there. But what we could do here is have it display an auto filter. If we do that, we have to specify the start column and the start row and the end column and the end row. So I'm going to have the start, we'll have it start on A2 or A3, because this is going to be the first row, second row. We'll have it start on A3, and we can have it go to Z1000, doesn't really matter. You can embed an image if you want to do that. You can freeze cells. So frozen cells would be a way to have it so the top is always visible no matter how many tickets there are in there. So we'll have it start there. So the number of frozen columns, we'll do 0, and the frozen rows, we'll do the first 3 rows are frozen again, since we got those 2 at the top. If you want to merge cells, you can go ahead and click on that, and you can add multiple of these. So let's say we want to merge these cells C1 and C2 up here. I can come into here, add merge cells. So my start row. One thing to notice in this, 0 indexed means that you start counting at 0. So my start row is going to be, instead of 1, it's actually going to be 0. And my end row is going to be 1. And then my start column in this case is going to be 2 and 2, I believe. So this means I go from kind of coordinate 0, 2. So if we come up here, 0, 1, 2. And we go to column 1, or row 1, column 2. So row 1, column 2. But you start counting at 0. That's just kind of how the merge works within Excel for whatever reason. So we can go ahead and do that. If you want to just do any cell overriding of content, you could do it from here. Usually you would do the cell content overrides up here in the cells, like we showed in the previous part in the video. But if you wanted to do it down here, you have full access to get this editor and put in a row, a column, and do this whole thing from here. And you can do this, multiple different times. So you can actually give your cell coordinates and do the overrides directly without going up into the other section. Probably won't ever do that, but you could do that. And then the last down here is to override column width. So by default, they'll be about the same size as the content, the widest content in there, except for CSVs don't have that, obviously. But if you wanted to put in specific column widths, you can give a min width, a max width, or specific width for column A, column B, column C. So you can come through here and specify column widths if you want it to, have that specified. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and save. And we are going to download a copy of this and take a look at some of the stuff we put in there. So we'll do that in the last section. So now that we've gone in and we've finished up building out this report template, or at least the example one, showing enough of the different things you can do in here to get your report template to work, we can go ahead and click Download Test Report, which will grab some recent tickets, whatever you have in the system there, and we'll download them so that you can open it up and see what it looks like before you kind of launch full in and give access to it. So I'm going to open it up here, and you can see that we have these columns right here. We have purchaser, pickup location, drop-off location, which pulled in that data right here. I think if I scroll over here, you can see I've got ID number, and I have that invoice name and invoice date, which if you recall were that kind of invoice name, invoice date. But because this isn't tied to an invoice, this map's content didn't work because there is no invoice tied to this right now. But you'll see right here that this merge worked right here. So we specified a merge down here to merge these cells, and then the frozen cells, if there was enough data, I think I can go ahead and add more. Then you actually, I think that this is an Excel. This is like the default Mac one, which probably doesn't do frozen cells, but we would have frozen those cells up here. Some of the other stuff in here you'll notice is that we've got, barrels, miles, and then we have this one that is, E4 divided by F4. So that worked out pretty well. Let me escape that. And then we have our test hard code that came through just fine. And then the last one right here, we have this not rerouted. So we went through and we built that custom logic, and it must have had 0 miles for the reroute. In fact, if I pull up this ticket right here, which I have prepared over here, you can see that there's 0 rerouted miles, which is why here on the report, it didn't have any reroutes. And then the arrival time is blank because if I go over into this ticket and come over to the timestamp, it doesn't have an arrival like a pickup time or a drop-off time. It just has these departed times. So the timestamp we chose was not one that had been done yet. So that's basically all there is to do with the report template builder. And once again, it does have a bit of a learning curve, as you've probably noticed. But some of the stuff is fairly straightforward after you've done it a couple of times. If you do need any help with it, in addition to watching this video or going back and rewatching parts of it, please reach out to support. They'd be more than happy to help you out and make sure that you're successful in generating a report that looks the way that you want it or that your customers want it. And with that, we'll wrap this video up, and in another video, we'll go over the PDF report generator as well. Thanks for watching.